Hello and welcome. So in this video we are going to have a look at the client domain, then broadcast domain, and we also be looking at some of the devices that interact with these domains. So back in the early days of Ethernet development, when it was being developed in the early 80s or late 70s, we did not have these sophisticated devices that we now call as switches. Back in the days we had either Ethernet or we had bus topology. So client domain, in essence, what client domain means is that an area where there are chances of collision or data getting corrupted. So let's say we have 4 PCs over here. Let's say we have 4 PCs over here, and these PCs are connected with a shared medium. For the sake of this discussion, let's say this is a bus, or it's a wire onto which these 4 devices are connected through Ethernet. So it's a bus topology where we have the aisle and we have rows onto the sides, and these, let's number these 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we can see that we have one shared medium. Remember that at the end of the day, it's all about the electrical signals that is transferring onto a medium. So if it's a shared medium and this device sends electrical signal onto this medium, and this device is also trying to send the signal onto this medium, then definitely those signals will collide. So in Ethernet shared medium topology, or in a domain where there are chances of getting collision, the technology that is deployed by this kind of topology is known as CSMACD, or carrier sense multiple access with collision detection. And essentially what it means is that if any of these hosts want to transfer data to any other host, first it will sense the carrier for presence of any signal. If it is clear there is no signal onto the carrier, then it will start sending the data. Now let's say host number 1 wants to transfer data to host number 3. It senses the carrier and there is no signal, and it starts to send data. As soon as it starts to send data, let's say that host number 2 had also sensed the medium, and at the very same moment it also starts to send data. Now this data will collide, and as soon as this data collides, these hosts will come to know that a collision has occurred. They will stop sending the data. They will back off for a random period of time. That time is usually in microsecond or millisecond, and then they will again sense the medium for presence of any signal and start sending data again. If another collision occurs, they will again back off, wait for a random time, and then do the same exercise again. So in client domain environment, where we have a medium which is shared among the devices that are connected to it, they can either listen. Let me just clear it and write it down in this way. They can either listen or they can either send. They cannot do both the same task at the same time. So essentially what it means that a device is operating in a half duplex mode. It can either send the data or it can either receive the data. So let's say if we have an Ethernet card which is supporting 100 Mbps, 100 megabits per second, then the device can either send the 100 Mbps or it can either receive the 100 Mbps, but not the both functions at the same time. If there is a collision domain, let's say we have this bus over here. If this is a medium which is subject to collision domain, do we have a device that alleviates this problem of collision? Yes, we do. Switches are the devices that provide the functionality of breaking a collision domain. So if we have a switch over here, and let me just symbolize it again. So if we have a switch over here, it has got 4 ports and 4 ports onto this side, and let's say we have 2 PCs, or rather 3 PCs connected. Then all of these PCs, if they want to start to send the data to each other, let me just rename it. If they want to send the data to each other, even at the same time, collisions will not occur. Why? Because that's the functionality of the switch, that it breaks the collision domain. It is no longer a shared medium. There is a different hierarchy or different structure in between the switch that separates the signals from getting collided. So when we have no collisions on the system, we can operate at full duplex mode. So in essence, it means that this PC can send and receive data at full speed. If it has got a 100 Mbps Ethernet card, it can send and receive the data at 100 Mbps rate, and there will be no collisions. So the first concept that you need to remember from this slide is that switches break the collision domain. The next concept that I want to tell you about is the broadcast domain. And broadcast domain means that, remember from the earlier lectures I had mentioned about the broadcast address. Broadcast address, do you remember that? Where we had, let's say we had this IP address, and we had a network portion over here, and we had a host portion over here. Let me just write it like this, host portion. And I said that a broadcast address is an address where all the bits of the host are turned on. So it was like 255 and 255 or 255. Remember that? Now broadcast domain means that when a host sends a traffic whose destination IP is the broadcast IP, then that traffic goes on to the every other node onto that segment. And what I mean by that is that, let's say we have a router over here, and we have a router over here, and on this router we have a switch, and with this router we have a hub. These routers are interconnected, and with this switch we have 2 hosts, and over here we have 2 hosts. So remember from the previous slide that I mentioned that switch breaks the collision domain. So as many ports on the switch, as many collision domains. Over here we have 3 collision domains, 1, 2, 3. It means that traffic on these 3 links will not collide. Similarly, the link between these 2 routers is also a separate collision domain. The link between the router and the hub and the 2 links that are connected to the PC, since it's a hub, it does not break the collision domain. It's just like a shared medium. So we have one collision domain over here. It means that there are chances of data collision over to this side. Now what broadcast domain does is that, let's say this PC sends a packet whose host bits are all turned on. Then if there had been many number of PCs connected to this switch, all those PCs would have received that frame. So it's like a broadcast, just like a TV broadcast or radio broadcast, where one is the speaker, this one is the speaker, and everybody else is the listener. So that concept comes over here and it becomes a broadcast. But that broadcast will not go past this router. That broadcast will come up till here. Router will listen to this broadcast, but by default, and remember this word, that by default, routers do not forward broadcast traffic. It will simply prone it over here. It will listen onto its own interface, but it will not forward it. That default behavior can be overridden, but by default, routers do not forward the broadcast. So the important thing that you have learned from this slide is that routers break the broadcast domain. Switches break the client domain, but they do not break the broadcast domain. But routers break the client domain as well as the broadcast domain. So in this example over here, we have two routers, one switch and one hub. So as I mentioned over here earlier, that this is one client domain because hub is not breaking the client domain. Over here we have switch. So as many client domain as the number of connected hosts onto the ports. And in between the two routers, we also have a separate client domain and a separate broadcast domain. So the result is that we have one client domain, broadcast domain over here. We have one client domain, broadcast domain over here. We have one broadcast domain over here, but many client domains over here because we have deployed a switch. Similarly, if we had, let's say, a number of routers connected in this way, we had like this, then each segment has got its own broadcast domain and client domain. But if we had, let me just clear this figure and redraw it for you guys. Let's say we have a switch which is connected to another switch, and this one is also connected to another switch, and let's make it a square. And let's say that over here we have a router, and of course we have a many number of workstations connected to these switches. Then all the switches that are operating onto this side of the router or which are connected, they are all in the same broadcast domain. It means that if a PC sends a data with the host bits set to all ones, then that traffic will be forwarded by all of these switches to all the hosts that are connected to their ports, but will be stopped by the router from going anywhere else. But on the other hand, each and every port will have its own client domain. The data coming from to this port will not collide with the data coming from this port. They are totally in separate domains. Similarly, the data coming onto this port will not collide from the data coming onto this port. So the concept of breaking the client domain by the switches. Now lastly, let's see some of the devices that I've already mentioned, but a couple of devices that I had not mentioned and their functionality. And the one thing that I need to mention over here is that if we have a broadcast onto a segment and that broadcast is let passed by the routers, then you can imagine that if all the traffic that is coming onto the internet, if it has broadcast, then we can have a potential problem of network congestion. So that's why I was saying that by default, routers do not forward the broadcast. We can override that behavior, but normally network administrators or engineers, they tend to stick with the defaults. Now over here, we have a couple of devices. Number one is the repeater. Repeater is a device which acts like a signal regenerator. So let's say we have a host over here, and remember I had mentioned earlier that Ethernet length is normally goes up to 100 meter. So let's say we have another host over here, and this is at 200 meter distance from host number 1. So what we can do is that we can put a repeater in between the two hosts and put one end of the cable onto one side and the other end of the host onto the other side. So what this repeater will do, it will take the signal, amplify it, and forward it on towards host number 2. And similarly, the traffic coming from host number 2 will be amplified and forwarded to host number 1. Now remember that repeater is a physical layer device. As per the OSI model, it operates at the physical layer. So just like bus topology or hub, it does not break the collision domain. So there are very much chances that the traffic coming from hub, from terminal number 1 and terminal 2 may collide if they tend to send the data at the same time. Now we have seen the functionality of hubs, that they also do not break the collision domain. The difference between repeater and hub is that normally hubs are called multi-port repeaters. So it's the same functionality as that of the repeater, that is simply regenerate the signal, but it has got multiple ports. Then after that we have bridge, and it is normally drawn in a symbolic form like this. It's not that accurate, but I am trying to make it as accurate as possible. Now you might say that this does look like a bridge. I mean, bridge is like inverted shape, isn't it? Bridge is like this shape, where we have a water channel going from the lower part of the bridge, but in data networks the bridge is drawn in upside down position. And what bridges do is that they break the collision domain, but their functionality is limited as compared to switch in a way that, first of all, their functionality is embedded into a software, and secondly, most of the time bridges have got one input port and only one output port. While we have seen the functionality of switches, that they break the collision domain and they have multiple ports. Switches can go up to even hundreds of ports. You will see in upcoming videos that we'll be using switches which will have 24 ports or maybe even 48 ports, and all of these ports will have their own separate collision domains. We have also seen the functionality of router, where it is denoted by an elliptical or circular shape with a cross on top of it. And routers, they break the collision domain as well as the broadcast domain. Also, we have seen that switches work at the layer 2 of the OSI model. It means that they forward the frames based on the MAC addresses, while routers work on the layer 3 of the OSI model, and they forward the frame based on the IP addresses. Let me just write it: layer 2 MAC addresses and layer 3 IP addresses. Also, as I mentioned earlier, that switches are fast as compared to bridges because the functionality of switching is normally embedded into their hardware by a mechanism which is called as ASIC, or application specific integrated circuits. It means that the functionality of switching is kind of embedded or hard burned into the hardware of the switch. So switches are fast, and plus they have more number of ports as compared to the bridge. So that was the concepts of collision domain and broadcast domain. I hope you have liked the video, and I'll see you in the next one.